The city of dreams. To outsiders, New York City is a place of infinite possibilities, a pulsing heart of ambition, where dreams collide against the steel and glass of the skyline. Every morning, the streets thrum with life. Taxis honking, coffee carts steaming up the brisk air, and thousands of dreamers pushing past one another as they chase after something bigger, something more. For Mia Anderson, arriving from the small town of Dayton, Ohio, felt like stepping onto the set of a movie she'd watched her whole life. Even her first walk through Manhattan was electric, the sidewalks overflowing with a mosaic of people. Artists lugging portfolios, models striding in heels, businessmen glued to their phones, and musicians filling subway tunnels with hopeful tunes. The lights never seemed to dim. Whether at midnight or midday, Times Square blinked relentlessly, advertising Broadway shows, designer brands, and a world of endless choices. Mia would sometimes wander aimlessly, just to soak it all in, the city humming with energy beneath her feet. But beyond the iconic scenes, she saw something else too, a city that could swallow you up if you weren't careful. The pace was brutal. The expectations were even higher.
Olivia.
Back in Ohio, talent and hard work had been enough to set Mia apart. In New York, it seemed like everyone around her was just as driven, and the competition made her pulse quicken. But she loved it. She felt alive in a way she never had before, knowing that every block, every conversation, and every bold choice could be the one to change her life forever. Overhead, countless skyscraper windows glimmered, each a box of light.
Thank you.
The home, the office, the dream of someone gambling on their future. If I can make it here, I can make it anywhere, Mia would tell herself, smiling as she recalled the line from an old Sinatra song spinning in her mind. She believed it. She had to. Because to live in New York was to believe in the possibility of miracles, as long as you never stopped chasing them. A hopeful beginning. Landing her first real job in Manhattan felt to Mia like the universe had finally said yes to all her hard work. She'd spent months perfecting her portfolio, rehearsing interview answers, and dreaming of the golden phone call that would change her life. When it finally came, from one of the most prestigious design firms in New York, she could barely believe it. Packing up her tiny apartment, saying goodbye to her family, Mia arrived at the glass-walled building on 57th Street with trembling hands and a heart bursting with hope. The office was everything she'd imagined, and more. Sleek white walls, sunlight glinting off enormous windows, and racks upon racks of fabric samples in every color imaginable. Even her ID badge, printed with her new title, Junior Designer, felt like a ticket to a whole new world. Every morning, as she rode the elevator up to the 12th floor, Mia reminded herself that she belonged here, that this city and this career were hers for the taking. The first weeks were a blur of introductions, orientation meetings, and late-night brainstorming sessions. She quickly learned that success in New York meant more than talent. It required resilience, quick thinking, and an eagerness to learn. She absorbed every lesson, never missing a chance to ask questions, sketch out ideas, or volunteer for projects no one else wanted. Through the maze of new faces, one person stood out, Olivia, sharp-witted, impeccably dressed, and seemingly at ease in every situation. Olivia was the type of colleague who turned heads when she entered the room. She introduced herself to Mia on day one, offering a confident handshake and a quick wink. Over shared coffees and hurried lunches, the two formed an easy bond. Olivia seemed to genuinely enjoy showing Mia the ropes, explaining company politics, trading gossip, and offering advice on how to make an impression during big meetings. For Mia, every little success, seeing her sketches pinned up in the conference room, receiving a compliment from a senior designer, or simply keeping up during a late-night work session, was a small triumph,
Exactly is this document,
evidence
Mia?
that she was truly beginning to carve out her place in this new world. Hope glimmered on the horizon, fueled by her determination and the growing feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had what it took to make it in New York. The shock of betrayal. Mia's first few months at the firm felt surreal.
This is going to be harder than I thought.
Each day filled with possibility, challenge, and the slow, intoxicating climb of self-confidence. Her friendship with Olivia had grown quickly. By now, Olivia felt less like a colleague and more like the trusted big sister Mia had always wished for. Someone who shared secret laughs by the office coffee machine, always slipped an encouraging smile across the conference table, and offered late-night pep talks when deadlines loomed. Together, they brainstormed on projects, scrawled notes on napkins, drunkenly recounted dreams and disappointments over martinis at a hole-in-the-wall East Village bistro. Olivia, so worldly and poised, seemed to genuinely want to see Mia succeed. She helped Mia navigate the firm's tangled web of office politics, coached her for presentations, and listened to her worries about fitting in. So, when their supervisor announced a prestigious internal contest for the firm's upcoming spring collection, a chance for junior designers to submit partial or full concept boards, Mia didn't hesitate. She poured herself into her designs, sketching late into the night in her tiny apartment, experimenting with fabric swatches, and cutting references out of old-fashioned magazines. With sleepless enthusiasm, she discussed her progress with Olivia, showing her initial sketches and color palettes, debating silhouettes and narrative themes. They shared everything: inspiration, strategy, coffee, and trust. The collection that was hers in Europe. Mia finished her concept board, bold, fresh, and brimming with the unique Midwestern nostalgia she'd craved to showcase in the city. She left it in the office studio overnight, just as submission guidelines required. She went home that evening, feeling vulnerable but hopeful, replaying Olivia's earlier words. "You've really nailed it, Mia. They'd be crazy not to love this. I can't wait to see your name up there." The following week, a palpable energy hung over the office as the submissions were reviewed. At the end-of-week company meeting, management gathered everyone in the open concept lounge. Glossy presentation boards displayed on easels, the air crackling with competitive anticipation. Mia stood in the crowd, heart thumping, knuckles white around her coffee cup. When the creative director stepped up and began unveiling the finalists, her collection was second on display. A familiar montage of sun-bleached denim, airy cotton, faded prairie blues, and wildflower prints. Mia stared, then blinked, confusion turning to dread. Pasted boldly at the top, next to the title, "Winds of Home," was Olivia's name. Everything shatters. The realization struck with numb finality, diffusing through her chest like ice. Her concept, her sketches, her story, under someone else's name. Shock and disbelief collided, sending a rush of heat to her cheeks. Olivia, only 2 feet away, was clapping with the crowd, an unreadable expression on her exquisitely made-up face. Mia gripped the edge of her chair as fragments of memory snapped into cruel focus. The late-night conversations about concept direction. The colored swatches she'd left out, believing in trust. The email drafts, attachments casually shared for critique. She'd exposed every inch of her creative process to Olivia, and never once imagined duplicity. Her mind reeled, desperate to rationalize. Was this a mistake? Did Olivia submit similar ideas by coincidence? But as the mood in the room grew jubilant, Olivia accepted congratulations, her signature smile practiced and poised. Mia knew it wasn't an accident. Olivia was answering questions about her collection, embellishing details, basking in the sudden adoration of the firm's leaders. Each laugh, each gracious nod felt like a hard slap. Alone among many. For the rest of the meeting, Mia sat silent, her pulse surging painfully in her ears. She forced herself to breathe as tears gathered, refusing to let them fall in sight of Olivia or anyone. When the crowd finally broke, Mia pretended to check her phone, excusing herself to the women's restroom. There, in the cool sanctuary of a locked stall, she squeezed her fists and let herself grieve. She tried recalling the events with cold logic, turning details over in her head. At what moment had she given Olivia all the ammunition? When had their friendship turned from camaraderie to something calculated? Had she missed a warning sign, a note of envy in Olivia's praise? A glance held too long at her drafts? No, it was simple. Olivia had stolen her work, gambled on Mia's trust, and won, at least for now, Olivia's performance. Over the next days, Olivia acted as though nothing unusual had happened. She continued to greet Mia with warmth in her voice and a civil smile. She offered her coffee, chatted about weekend plans, praised the general talent among the contestants. Behind it all, Mia sensed the cold-blooded strategy. A performance for the office, loyalty and likability carefully curated. Every interaction became agonizing. Mia, forced by proximity and position to see Olivia daily, mastered the art of restraint. Each time, others congratulated Olivia or admired her groundbreaking ideas. Mia's stomach twisted. She remembered every hour spent explaining those ideas. Now, even the smallest acknowledgement of her own creativity was lost. Isolation and doubt rumors swirled about Olivia's meteoric rise in the company. Senior partners talked about her sudden evolution as a designer, her bold new vision. Mia struggled to maintain her composure, doubting herself moment to moment. Was she naive for being so open? Should she confront Olivia outright or go directly to HR? Would anyone believe her, a small-town newcomer without seniority, over the admired, well-established Olivia? Nights became sleepless, each hour replaying scenes of betrayal and self-questioning. She drafted dozens of unsent texts to Olivia, then to her parents, then back to herself. Yet shame, a quiet, persistent fog, kept her silent. It was as if the whole city, with all its promises, had turned against her. A decision emerges, but beneath the grief, a harder resolve began to take root. Mia could not let this define her. Not here, not now. She began to trace her steps, collecting alibis, searching for old drafts and timestamps. Each act of betrayal became a marker in her mind. Painful, yes, but also clarifying. She realized that the only way forward was through the fire. She would gather every shred of evidence, and she would let the truth speak for itself. Still, for now, she allowed herself the heartbreak. She had trusted, been betrayed, and in the city of miracles and mirages, she understood. Even the brightest dreams could cast long, dark shadows, rising after the fall. For days after the betrayal, the world around Mia felt colorless, muted by the ache in her chest and the rawness of her trust so deliberately shattered. Manhattan's famed vitality blurred into an exhausting background noise. She rode the subway in a fog. Office chatter at her firm sounded distant, like the echo of some parallel universe where Mia was still whole, still hopeful. Yet even as pain threatened to consume her, Mia's small-town spirit, the spirit that once pushed her to chase the New York dream refused to surrender entirely. At her lowest points, memories of childhood, pep talks from her mother, or old stories of underdog heroes would surface, whispering resilience. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps sheer stubbornness, but Mia clung to this thin, stubborn thread that urged her not to allow betrayal to define her story. Nights of restlessness and resolve. The evenings were the hardest. Mia would sink onto the edge of her tiny bed, stretching her gaze across the darkened apartment, haunted by flashes of those final moments in the office lounge. Olivia's dazzling, victorious smile, the polite applause, the knowing look some of her colleagues cast in her direction. She replayed these scenes over and over, searching for clues she'd missed, signs that the disaster looming overhead, in hindsight, appeared inevitable. Sleep eluded her. Her mind churned with what ifs and should haves, pitting her battered self-esteem against a growing, albeit fragile, determination. She scrolled through old emails, searching for patterns in Olivia's messages, reassurances that now felt suspicious, requests for file attachments that, in retrospect, had always been carefully timed. She found herself reading and rereading text exchanges, late-night brainstorming sessions, sketches saved in cloud folders stamped with date and time. The first sparks of action. It took a full week before the first spark of resolve truly caught fire. Mia's parents had called from Ohio. Hearing worry in her voice, she struggled to disguise. They listened as she haltingly explained that things in New York weren't going quite as planned. Her mother's words, gentle yet fiercely proud, stayed with her. "You've never needed to fit the mold, honey. You always built your own. Don't let anyone tell your story for you." Something clicked. Mia realized the only way out of this nightmare was through it. Methodical, clear-eyed, and armed with truth. She would not fight dirt with dirt. She would fight with facts, evidence, and the kind of dignity that could withstand New York's toughest storms. Gathering evidence, the quiet revolution. Mia began the slow work of assembling her case, not for revenge, but for justice. She sifted through her email correspondences, saving any message where she had sent draft files, raw sketches, or notes to Olivia. She tracked version histories on her design apps, capturing digital timestamps of her original work. If a question came up about the timeline of her ideas, she'd be ready. On evenings when the loneliness pressed too close, she channeled all her anguish into organizing these files, creating folders titled Evidence Do Not Delete, and copying archives to a secure drive. She also retraced conversations with other colleagues, mentions of her process during coffee breaks, brainstorms she'd shared in staff meetings. Mia became a keen observer, collecting not only proof, but also glimpses of how trust and deception moved through her workplace. She realized for the first time how many people, in their own quiet ways, bore scars of office betrayal too. A sympathetic nod here, a hushed bit of gossip there. She wasn't as alone as she'd believed. Reclaiming her voice efforts to maintain professional composure took their toll. Olivia floated through the office with practiced grace.
This is a win.
But Mia kept her distance, limiting their interactions to only what was necessary. At the same time, she tried not to let bitterness warp her. She greeted team members with the same warmth she always had, even as she struggled to keep her smile from cracking at the edges. One afternoon, while sorting through the company's shared design archive, she found additional drafts that Olivia had submitted, too close in style and substance to ignore, paralleling her own original pieces. Her heart raced with indignation, but this discovery also sharpened her focus. With each found document, each timestamp matching her previous work. Mia's sense of injustice was overtaken by a quiet confidence. The narrative was changing. This was no longer a story of victimhood, but one of reclamation. She also started keeping a journal, a place to process her anger and sadness away from prying eyes. The act of writing, of narrating her side of the events, helped her gradually transform pain into purpose. "You are not invisible," she wrote in bold ink, "and you will not be erased." Tentative steps toward healing. Mia learned to pace herself. On weekends, instead of spiraling through reruns of her humiliation, she walked the city, Central Park when the weather allowed, or window shopping along Soho's designer boutiques. In her solitude, she found a bittersweet comfort. The city, in all its chaos, couldn't care less about her setbacks, and that was oddly liberating. She was free to rebuild on her own terms. A chance encounter at a local cafe brought unexpected encouragement. An older designer, Martha, who'd been with the firm for decades and watched countless bright-eyed juniors flame out, paused to compliment Mia's recent color work. "Your style is unmistakable. Don't let corporate drama change who you are," Martha said, her tone kind but knowing. That brief exchange lingered with Mia, reminding her of why she had chosen this career in the first place. The weight of silence and the cost of speaking up. Still, the idea of escalation filled Mia with dread. The stakes were overwhelming. What if she was branded as a troublemaker? Would anyone believe her over Olivia, who had the trust of management and years of relationships behind her? The familiar fear of standing out for the wrong reasons haunted her, especially as a newcomer and as a woman in a fiercely competitive industry. But reputation, Mia realized, was not as valuable as integrity. She wouldn't buy acceptance at the cost of her name or her craft. The lines were clear, if terrifying. Each time doubt returned, she reviewed her evidence, reminding herself of the facts, of what she had actually lived through. A quiet transformation. Over the course of several weeks, Mia's mindset shifted. The grief remained, but it was layered now with a budding sense of agency. For the first time since arriving in New York, she felt not just like a guest, but a survivor, someone with the power to shape her own ending. She started sketching new designs, not for the contest nor the firm, but for herself. She played with ideas that celebrated resilience, drawing inspiration from cityscapes and wild Midwestern meadows alike. Art became a lifeline and a roadmap, charting a way out of darkness. In the mirror one morning, Mia spotted something she hadn't seen since before Olivia's betrayal. A glimmer of defiance in her own eyes, a spark craving justice more than revenge. Her journey was not over. The fall had been brutal, but she was rising, stronger, sharper, and absolutely unwilling to let go of her voice. The calm before the storm. New York's relentless skyline called out with the promise of another chance. Standing on her rooftop at sunset, the wind tugging at her hair, Mia allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. She was ready for the next step, armed not just with her talent, but with the grit only those burned by betrayal ever truly know. And in that shimmering quiet, as the city's lights flickered awake, Mia made herself a promise. She wouldn't just recover her place, she would claim it. And no one, not even Olivia, could ever steal that away. Turning the tables, it was almost midnight when Mia sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, a half-empty mug of cold coffee at her side. Documents spilled like waves across the screen. Drafts, emails, cloud folder histories, screenshots tagged by date. Her small apartment was silent, except for the soft hum of the fridge and the tapping of her fingers against the keys. She was tired, but this was a different kind of tired now. No longer paralyzed by pain, but driven by determination. The weeks since Olivia's betrayal had transformed Mia, sharpening her focus. It was no longer just about righting a personal wrong. She understood, perhaps for the first time, the responsibility she owed to herself, her craft, and every other hopeful newcomer whose trust might one day be gambled away in the name of ambition. This wasn't about burning bridges or seeking vengeance. It was about insisting, quietly but unyieldingly, on the truth. Building a case, not just for herself. Mia had always been diligent, but now she became meticulous, combing through every piece of evidence with a forensic eye. She organized her files into folders labeled by theme and timeline, concept sketches, email exchanges, digital artboard histories, even innocuous work chat messages where she'd shared or described her original ideas in real time. She went over her calendar and made note of every meeting where she'd presented her progress, detailing which colleagues might have overheard her explanations or seen her boards. There were sleepless nights when doubt pressed in. Was this enough? Would a pile of screenshots and digital timestamps be proof? Or just noise in the politics of a giant firm? Would management view her as a whistleblower or merely as a disgruntled junior? She wrestled with the possibility that her entire effort might backfire. The thought surfaced often on late subway rides home, the city outside a blur of neon against black glass. But every time fear threatened to take over, she reminded herself of her own quiet integrity. She wasn't just fighting for acknowledgement. She was fighting for the right to own her own story. Seeking allies, softly, cautiously, Mia knew the stakes. She'd seen what happened to those who crossed the wrong person in a competitive environment. So before making any official move, Mia quietly reached out to a few trusted colleagues, people who'd been present when she discussed her concepts long before the submissions. Over casual chats in the break room or walks for coffee, she worked their memories for small confirmations. Had they seen her landscape mood board pinned up weeks before? Did they remember her brainstorming those faded prairie blues and wildflower patterns late one night? One or two hesitated, unsure, unwilling to get involved, but a few offered support. "You showed that whole thing to me before you even printed it," said one sympathetic designer, lowering her voice. Another remembered Olivia lingering in the studio after hours, long after Mia left for the night. Small as these fragments were, Mia logged them as corroboration. They weren't just lifelines. They were anchors, binding her version of events to the collective memory of the office, preparing for the confrontation. By the time her case was nearly airtight, Mia had replayed every scenario in her mind. Confrontation, dismissal, vindication, even open disbelief. She anticipated management's possible reactions, their skepticism, their tired impatience with drama, their reluctance to offend a well-liked team player like Olivia. She also knew the risks of office gossip, how quickly a story could be spun out of context, how easily the subject of sympathy could flip from victim to villain if she wasn't careful. Yet her resolve was reinforced by every piece of evidence she gathered. The facts couldn't be erased, no matter how charming Olivia's veneer or how tangled the company hierarchy. Mia rehearsed what she'd say, again and again, in front of her bathroom mirror. Calm, clear, and above all, professional. This isn't about personal conflict, she'd remind herself. This is about creative ethics and ownership. Her voice trembled at first, but each time grew steadier, choosing the moment. The timing of her disclosure mattered. Too abrupt, and she risked blindsiding her managers. Too hesitant, and she might lose the thread of momentum as Olivia leveraged her newfound status. Mia bided her time for the right
Cold kitchen
opening,
floor.
ideally a project review or one-on-one session with the creative director, someone with the weight and fairness needed to judge the facts objectively. When the opportunity came, it was almost anticlimactic. Mia's creative director, Rebecca, called her in for a routine check-in. The tone was generic, the agenda as vague as ever, updates on ongoing projects, feedback on her recent contributions. Olivia's win 8 days prior was still a hot topic, but not Mia's concern, at least not publicly. But as Rebecca, with her sharp eyes and even sharper sense of the firm's dynamics, asked Mia about her progress, Mia knew it was her chance. Actually, Mia began, willing her voice to stay steady. There's something I'd like to discuss. It's regarding the recently announced contest results and some concerns I have about the originality of one collection in particular. Rebecca's eyes narrowed, a flash of alertness cutting through the usual managerial routine. Go on, letting the truth speak. Mia pulled out her folder, both digital and printed, and described the history of her design's evolution. She presented her sketches, drafts, email threads, showing the back and forth with Olivia. Dates attached, ideas matched line for line. Where possible, she supplemented her words with screen recordings, showing timestamps and cloud-save histories. She didn't accuse, she explained. She showed process photos, her hand in frame, working on the mood boards in her apartment. She referenced the colleagues who'd informally corroborated seeing her boards weeks before the competition. Her approach was clear, confident, and as emotionless as she could manage. She resisted any urge to vent or break down. The most difficult part was the sense of exposure. Even as she laid bare her creative soul for someone else's scrutiny, she relied on facts, not pleading. Rebecca listened quietly, taking notes, her face unreadable. She asked direct questions. Mia answered, not embellishing, not omitting. The meeting ran longer than scheduled, branching into side discussions about design process, intellectual property norms at the company, and precedents from past disputes. As Mia left the office, adrenaline drained. She felt neither victory nor relief, just exhaustion and a fragile hope. She didn't know yet what would happen next. There might still be pushback. There might be attempts to hush her story, to keep the company's name clean. But in that moment, for the first time in weeks, Mia allowed herself a sliver of cautious optimism. She had done the hardest thing. She had stood up, not just for herself, but for all that she believed a designer could still represent in a city obsessed with success and speed. The days ahead would reveal whether truth, armed with preparation, persistence, and courage, could finally turn the tables. Justice restored. The days following Mia's fateful meeting with Rebecca passed in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. Each morning, she arrived at the studio with a knot in her stomach, scanning faces for clues, waiting for some sign that the tide might finally turn. The firm, usually bustling with the reassuring rhythm of creativity, now felt charged with invisible electricity. Whispers behind closed office doors, hushed conversations that broke off when Mia entered the room. Sidelong glances exchanged in the elevators. Mia tried to keep her focus, plunging into whatever project she was assigned. But her nights were restless. She replayed her conversation with Rebecca, second-guessing her every word, ruminating over whether she had been convincing, credible, or simply naive. Sometimes she dreamed of the worst, being dismissed, blacklisted, or ridiculed as a troublemaker for daring to speak up. But there were brighter moments too. A glint of self-respect, a growing
Thank
seed
you.
of hope that the truth, at last, was too clear to ignore. The investigation unfolds.
Are you able to
Behind the
comment on the new
scenes,
findings in
Rebecca
the case,
wasted
sir?
no time. The firm's upper management launched a discreet internal investigation, calling in both designers and witnesses from the contest. Emails and time-stamped files were requested. Staff were questioned, always in private, their responses kept confidential. For several days, Mia waited as her evidence was
I did what I had
scrutinized
to do.
and cross-referenced. She received no hints or updates, only the cold comfort of administrative silence. Olivia sensed the shifting atmosphere. She became quieter in meetings, her lavish compliments now edged with a nervous tension. She still played her part for the sake of appearances, but Mia noticed how her eyes
We are
darted
honored
toward
to be
management,
here. We are.
how her laughter grew tight at the edges. The easy confidence that once defined her had been replaced by a brittle
Make sure he gets the
defensiveness.
correct files.
Mia, meanwhile, found unexpected support among the ranks. Martha, the veteran designer, slipped her reassuring looks when their paths crossed in the break room. A junior colleague from marketing, who'd overheard part of the original brainstorming session, stopped Mia in the hall to quietly wish her luck. For the first time, Mia realized she was not as alone as she'd feared. Others were watching, not all of them indifferent, and not all ready
I'm
to
not
let
sure what you are
injustice
referring to.
slide for the sake of office harmony. The gathering storm. By the end of the following week, the entire company was called to an all-hands meeting. Mandatory attendance,
You're
no
clear in
agenda
5,
given. Rumors
5,
broke out like
4,
wildfire.
3.
Some suspected layoffs, others
How are
guessed
you
a
two doing
dramatic
tonight?
rebranding or the announcement of a major new client.
Just enjoying
Only a
our evening.
handful could read the tension on Mia's face or the way Rebecca's gaze lingered on Olivia. The meeting was held in the company lounge, a glass-walled space that captured the throbbing lights of Midtown. Management took the stage with grave expressions. Mia's heart pounded as she
This sequence
slipped
here
discreetly
indicates a clear
toward the
match.
back, wanting to be there and yet desperate to run. The firm's HR director cleared her throat, her voice steady but resolute. Our company's values are built on creativity, collaboration, and most importantly, integrity. Recent concerns have come to our attention regarding our internal design contest. After thorough review, including digital evidence, witness statements, and process documentation, we have reached a decision. She paused, letting the silence settle over the room. A silence so heavy that every creak of a chair, every nervous cough, sounded like thunder. In this case, she said, her words slow and deliberate, it has been found that the winning concept, Winds of Home, submitted under Olivia Chen's name, was in fact the original work of Mia Anderson. Shock rippled through the crowd. Heads swiveled in Olivia's direction. Olivia's face went pale, her composure visibly faltering for the first time. Mia felt her knees weaken, the culmination of so many sleepless nights tightening in her chest. Accountability and consequences. The HR director continued. This is a serious breach of our professional standards and creative ethics.
Just confirms our
The actions taken not only harm the individual designer, but erode the trust and spirit of the entire team. Effective immediately, the winner's status for the contest will be reassigned to its rightful owner, Mia Anderson. Corresponding
I know we got to
credits
say goodbye.
and any forthcoming project responsibilities will also be transferred accordingly. She paused, glancing toward Olivia. Regarding the violation, we regretfully announce that Olivia Chen's employment with our firm is terminated, effective today. We take plagiarism and unethical conduct with utmost seriousness. We hope this serves as a reminder of the values we expect from every member of our team. Olivia stood frozen for several seconds, lips parted as if searching for a rebuttal that wouldn't come. She hastily gathered her belongings, keys, phone, a carefully curated notepad, and left the lounge on unsteady feet. Some watched with a mix of shock and sympathy, others with silent vindication. Ultimately, it was the end of the myth Olivia had built at the expense of another's dreams, restoring reputation, reclaiming voice.
I need to know
As for
everything that
Mia,
happened that night.
the impact was immediate and immense. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, and then swelling as colleagues absorbed the news. Several team members approached her to offer congratulations and apologies, some sheepish, some heartfelt. Even those who had barely noticed her before now regarded her with new respect. Her creative director sought her out privately, offering not only validation, but genuine regret for how things had escalated. "I hope this hasn't discouraged you from sharing your ideas," Rebecca told her, voice warm yet tinged with remorse. "What you bring to this firm is rare, Mia. You stood up for yourself in a way not many could." Mia managed a grateful, trembling smile. For all its relief, her vindication brought a strange, complicated wave of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also grief for the innocence lost, for the colleague she'd once called friend, and for the naive trust she'd once worn as armor. The subtle power of justice. Over the next several days, the company made a point of publicizing both the conclusion of their investigation and the steps taken to reinforce ethical standards. New workshops and guidelines on creative ownership were introduced, and staff were encouraged to speak out about issues without fear of retaliation. Mia's work was not only restored, but placed front and center on the firm's website and marketing materials. She found herself invited to meetings with senior designers, asked to represent the firm at upcoming trade shows. Her ideas, at last, recognized under her own name. Yet justice, Mia learned, was more than a public rebalancing. It was also a quiet, internal process. The slow rebuilding of trust in herself, in her profession, and in the city she still hoped would one day feel like home. Walking home after work, she felt lighter, but also changed, wiser and wary, but more herself than at any moment since she'd first arrived. A new foundation justice, she understood, didn't erase pain, but gave meaning to perseverance. Standing on the edge of Central Park as dusk fell, Mia realized her story would be known not for the betrayal, but for how she responded in its wake. She had reclaimed her voice, and in doing so, had given others permission to do the same. For the first time in what felt like ages, Mia could breathe easy. New York's lights flickered in the distance, steadfast as ever, promising challenges and miracles in equal measure. And Mia, having found her footing in the city of dreams, walked forward, her head high, her story her own, born again, stronger than ever. Even after justice had been served and her work restored to its rightful place, Mia found the days that followed to be both liberating and strangely daunting. The storm of betrayal and public reckoning was over, but a quieter, more personal chapter was only just beginning. Where once her mornings were weighted with anxiety, now they returned, filled with a heady blend of freedom and new responsibility, a kind of emptiness waiting to be reshaped. The city, which had once seemed indifferent or even hostile, looked subtly different to Mia as she walked its crowded streets. Sunlight fell across avenues like a benediction. Taxi horns and the murmur of strangers felt less overwhelming somehow, and more like the background music to a life she was finally reclaiming for herself. Planting new roots, Mia threw herself into her work with a vigor even she found surprising. The fear that once shadowed every sketch, every brainstorm, had faded. She was no longer haunted by second-guessing or by the sense that someone else might be lurking, waiting to capitalize on her vulnerability. With the support of her team and the official recognition of her talent, she experienced a surge of creative energy. She began experimenting boldly. Fabrics she'd never dared try. Silhouettes few junior designers would risk proposing. Color palettes that pushed at the edges of convention. One of her new collections
exactly what we
drew
need.
on both her Midwestern heritage
is perfectly
and the
clear.
towering energy of New York. Themes of open fields
We work
and
very
urban
hard every
skylines
day,
blending
but
in
we knew
unexpected
we were
harmony.
building something
When she
special
presented these
for your life.
concepts to the senior
That's
team,
amazing.
the feedback was enthusiastic, sometimes awestruck. She heard herself described in meetings as trailblazing,
I just remember
original,
a
and
kind of
even
vague outline.
fearless.
A kind of face
Words
with
she
a
had always
strong
dreamed
jawline.
someone might use in reference to her.
I remember
More
this
than that,
place.
Mia felt respected for who she was, rather than having to orbit around another's shine. Victimhood was no longer her secret anchor. Something brighter, purpose perhaps, or earned pride, had taken its place.
I'm so
A
glad we got to
resonance
spend time
beyond the
together
office.
tonight.
The ripple
too, it was a
effects
good
of her
night.
ordeal flowed far past her own experience. Word of what had happened and how Mia had handled it circulated discreetly through the design community. Younger colleagues approached her seeking advice on navigating their own office politics. Interns asked her how she'd managed to stay strong amid so much pressure and doubt. One student, her voice anxious and hopeful, asked if Mia would mentor her. Mia realized that her battle was part of a much larger story, one shared by countless women, outsiders, and underdogs in creative fields. She accepted invitations to speak at university panels and grassroots design gatherings, sharing not only her technical skill, but the hard-won lessons of advocating for one's worth. Her inbox filled with thank you notes from strangers, each message a reminder that her courage had meant something wider than a single victory. She found herself, almost to her surprise,
It's good to see you
becoming a
again.
role
That's
model.
all right.
It wasn't a role she'd ever imagined,
It's been a long
or
time.
even wanted truthfully, but now she embraced it, determined to use her voice to amplify those who might be facing their own battles in silence. Healing in layers. For all her outward success, renewal was a slow, layered process. There were moments of fatigue, nights when ugly memories slipped from the past, muddying her newfound joy. Sometimes she caught herself glancing around a conference table, scanning for potential threats or hidden agendas. More than once, she hesitated before sharing a draft, the old fear of betrayal flaring up without warning. But each time she felt herself slipping, Mia confronted those doubts head on. She practiced honesty, not just with others, but with herself. She let herself feel wounded when old pain resurfaced and reached out to friends, mentors, and even a therapist for support. Through deliberate practice, she learned there was strength in acknowledging her vulnerability, not just in powering through it. Over time, the raw sting of the past dulled, replaced by a deeper self-knowledge and control. On weekends, she carved out time just for herself. Sometimes that meant long walks in Central Park, tracing winding paths beneath golden autumn leaves. Other times, it meant revisiting the quiet rituals that had once brought her comfort, sketching in her favorite cafe, reading poetry on fire escapes, or calling her family back in Ohio. Her laughter, now easy and unburdened. New opportunities, new horizons. The wake of Olivia's departure and Mia's ascendancy opened doors that once seemed unimaginable. She was invited to present her collections at showcases she had only attended as a spectator before. Magazine editors requested interviews about her journey, not the dramatic betrayal, but her creative process and her hopes for the future of the industry. Her boss nominated her for a National Young Designers Award, citing her resilience and vision as much as her artistry. With each new step, Mia felt her identity evolve from someone who survived injustice into someone who thrived despite it.
Have you seen this man?
She began collaborating with other designers who had their own stories of struggle and perseverance. Some of these projects took her beyond New York: pop-up events in Chicago, gallery talks in Portland, and workshops in her home state. Everywhere she went, she shared the message that success in any city, any field, was measured not by how few times you fell, but by how steadfastly you rose each time. Embracing her own legacy, standing in her studio one quiet evening, the skyline glittering in the twilight just outside her window, Mia paused to reflect on her journey. The girl who had landed in New York, filled with naive hope. The young professional shattered by betrayal, and the woman now rising again. Each was a part of her, layered like the patterns in her favorite textiles.
It was his brother.
She no longer ached to prove herself for someone's approval. Her sense of belonging didn't depend on praise or position alone. She was rooted, uniquely, stubbornly, courageously, in her own sense of self. She knew triumph would always attract both champions and challengers. But she also knew she couldn't let fear shape her story's next act. Mia spent less time wondering, what if, and more time savoring, what next?
Damn it!
The future, once intimidating and shrouded by old wounds, now shimmered with possibility, a beacon for the dreamers. As seasons shifted, Mia's place within New York in the industry matured. She continued to work hard, experiment, and inspire, but she also protected the lessons she'd learned about boundaries, about speaking up, about insisting on justice not just for herself, but for all who might follow. Her journey radiated a subtle but undeniable encouragement to those around
He
her,
was very agitated,
to the overlooked
yelling at the
intern
staff.
drafting ideas late at night, to the mid-career designer worried her voice would be drowned out, to anyone who had ever been told to be quiet, to conform, to accept less than their fair due. Stronger than ever, Mia Anderson moved forward, her scars
Recognize 'em?
now woven into her
Maybe.
story, her resilience a quiet promise to herself and to all who watched that no city, no job, and no betrayal could extinguish the light she had learned to kindle within. She had not just survived, she had been reborn,